The story of a man who believed in justice in a place where justice had no name. He built his home with bare hands, though he had fought for Florida's freedom with blood. But no judge cared, no sheriff came, and one night, the fire came instead.
They called it Florida, but it was barely a state. Just swamps, smoke, and silence. The year was 1849, 4 years after statehood, and Justice still rode a horse, drump, with no badge and no name. Down near the Suwannee, where the land was raw and the law was rumor, a man named Elias Greer tried to live clean. He had cleared the land himself, built a cabin with hands that once carried a rifle for the U.S. militia during the Seminole Wars. He had fought in the mud, had scars in his side from Spanish blades, Seminole arrows, and the white man's promises. But when the smoke cleared and the treaties were signed, all they got was a piece of paper. Land grant, 30 acres, 1 mule, freedom. Signed by an officer long dead. Elias was a black man, and in this Florida that meant 2 things. You were free on paper and hunted in practice. Still, he held on, fenced off what it could, grew corn, raised a few cattle, even helped bury a neighbor's child once when fever swept through the pines. People didn't thank him, but they noticed. And that's when Wade Cutler noticed too. Wade had come down from Georgia with 10 men and no deeds. He didn't care for who owned what. He saw Elias's plot and saw opportunity. A free black man sitting on good grazing land near water. First came the warnings, a bullet in the fence post. Then missing cattle. Then a neighbor whispering, "Might be time to leave, friend." But Elias wasn't a fool. He knew what land meant, and he had served in uniform. He had earned it. He went to the nearest town, Noonensville, dusty and tense, filled with men who still wore pistols indoors. He brought his papers, told the clerk his cattle were gone, said he feared for his life. The clerk looked him over, didn't touch the paper. "You saying a Cutler boy stole from you?" Elias nodded once. The room went still. "Well," the clerk said slowly, "you got paper. That's something." But nothing happened. No deputy came, no cattle returned. Instead, 2 nights later, his barn burned to the ground. His brother, who had lived with him since freedom, was found the next morning, face down in the river, ropes around his hands. Elias knelt beside the river bank, silent, steam rising from the water. He touched the earth, not crying, just memorizing. He buried his brother under an old oak tree, no marker, just stones. Then he did the only thing left. He walked to Tallahassee, 100 miles on foot, through thorn and fever, sleeping with a rifle under his arm, because the state had promised justice, because the government wore a seal now, not a uniform, and because if justice meant anything in this new Florida, it had to mean something for him. They made him wait 3 days in the sun. When a junior clerk finally spoke to him, he handed over his letter. He had written it himself, shaky but clear. "To the governor of Florida. My name is Elias Greer. I am a landowner and a veteran. My brother is murdered. My land is attacked. I ask only for protection, for the law to act. If I do not deserve this, then who does?" The clerk read it, blinked, and said, "We'll send word." But Elias knew the smell of lies. He'd marched past too many corpses to not know what silence meant. And because if justice meant anything in this new Florida, it had to mean something for him. Behind him, Florida turned its back. Ahead of him, the frontier waited now, darker, more angry. There were men in the woods who had already decided what Florida was, and it did not include men like him. Still, Elias walked, because justice wasn't just something you begged for. It was something you proved you deserved, even if the world refused to give it. And he would prove it, or die trying.
There are two kinds of silence on the Florida frontier. One comes from fear, the other is bought. Elias Greer had returned from Tallahassee with nothing but a "we'll look into it." But Florida didn't look into things. It looked away. Back in Newmansville, the Cutler boys rode freer than ever. 10 of them now, mounted and armed, calling themselves settlers. They were squatters, ex-soldiers, slave catchers, men who'd fought the Seminoles and now acted like Florida owed them blood. They didn't wear badges, but they patrolled, claimed land that wasn't theirs, whipped those who stood in their way. And when the law didn't stop them, they became the law. Elias tried again. He filed a formal complaint, brought a neighbor, a white man who'd seen the bonfire from a distance, brought the land grant papers, brought a shirt with blood still crusted on it. The judge sat back and said, "Mr. Greer, you say you own land, that you fought for this country. I commend that. But this is not Washington. This is Florida." A pause. "And men down here, we handle our problems face to face." Face to face meant gun to face, rope to face, fire to face. And the machinery of justice, court, paper, oath, was just a show. The real rules were made in back rooms and whispered in plantation parlors. Wade Cutler's cousin sat on the county council. His brother owned half the cattle driven down the King's Road. His father, a war hero. His name, more valuable than law. They saw Elias. They always saw him. But no one made eye contact. That night, someone rode past Elias' cabin and fired 2 shots into the wall. The next morning, someone left a coiled rope on his fence. This was the new Florida, where land was won by ambush and cattle theft, where vigilante groups, some calling themselves militias, roamed unchecked, where men who had once fought the Seminoles now bragged about burning black farms and chasing out half-breeds. Florida had no real jails, no real patrols, just a handful of sheriffs, most of them scared or bought. The law here wasn't written. It was owned. He'd fought beside white men, watched them die, held the line. When the war ended, they got medals. He got silence. "I served. I earned my land, and I will not be chased off it." Wade Cutler stands across from him, arms folded, smiling. He doesn't say nothing. Doesn't have to. The crowd says it for him. Don't bring trouble here. You people always want more. You got freedom, didn't you? That week, 2 of Elias's cattle were found gutted. His water barrel was poisoned with lye. His neighbor, the one who agreed to testify, disappeared. Gone. Just gone. No search, no questions. People whispered gators, but everyone knew it wasn't gators. "I thought being a man meant standing tall, owning land, raising your own. I thought wearing the uniform meant something. But out here, they only see the skin. He thought about leaving, taking the mule and heading south, starting over again. But then he thought about his brother, thought about the burned barn, thought about the oak tree with the stones. He carved one sentence into the inside of his cabin door. If justice does not live here, then let memory live instead. They would never be held accountable. No judge would listen. No sheriff would act. Not here. Not in Florida. This was the machinery of nothing, a system that looked like justice from a distance, but inside it was rot and power, dust and fear. And Elias wasn't just alone. He was outnumbered by silence. And in Florida, silence was as deadly as any rope. Elias Greer lived on for one more year, long enough for the rains to come, long enough to replant his field, long enough to rebuild his barn, smaller now, made from salvaged boards and stubbornness. He didn't wait for justice anymore. He documented everything, kept a ledger in the cracks of the walls, marked dates on bark, wrote names in charcoal. He made memory his armor. But Florida didn't forget either. They came just before harvest, 6 riders, no law, no words, just fire. They burned his field first, then his fence, then the cabin. He ran to the woods with nothing but a rifle and the clothes he wore. By dawn, nothing stood but smoke and stones. No one in town spoke of it. No arrests, no funerals, no search. The official record? Cabin fire, cause unknown, no survivors confirmed. But that was not the end, because the land remembered. The soil held stories like blood holds scars. And one of those stories was Elias. "You see that rise?" he says. "Used to be a house there, built by a man no one dared speak of. Said he had fought a war for this country. Said he owned that land. Said the law meant something." The boy asks what happened to him. The old man just shrugs. They say the night swallowed him. But the truth didn't vanish. It waited beneath the pines, inside the burned wood buried in the dirt, inside the single bullet still lodged in a tree near the river. They never marked his grave, never spoke his name in the corridor of the church. But the trees knew, the crows remembered, and the river never forgot. This was the frontier not seen in paintings, not carved into marble, not sung in school books. Florida was not tamed by law, it was conquered by threat, carved with fire and governed by who could ride hardest, speak loudest, and kill without blinking. And even as the cities rose, even as the papers printed new laws, the soil still whispered the old ones. Take what you can, silence the weak, punish those who speak, and never, ever answer the door when justice comes knocking. But the land doesn't forget. That crooked patch near the Suwannee still won't grow right. Locals say it's cursed. Others say it's sacred.
And sometimes when the wind is right, you can hear something at dawn. Not words, not ghosts, just a man walking, still asking a question. If justice is not for me, then who is it for?